All right, everyone. Welcome. I'd like to call our meeting to order. We're a few minutes behind, but I'd like to get us started. First of all, I would like to tell you all welcome to Draper. We're glad to have you. It's kind of cool to have everybody come out and see how we do things out here in the south east corner of the valley. Just to sort of orient you, this area is kind of where, if there was a downtown in Draper, at any given time in its history, this was sort of the area. Out over kind of as I'm pointing this direction to the east is where IFA is, and then there's our track station, our final terminus of tracks here in Draper. And there's a caboose there. If you haven't had a chance, maybe drive out that way. It commemorates what Draper was known for back in the farming days. It was known for really one thing, and it was eggs. They farmed a specific egg that was white, very white, and it was a highly sought after product. And for many years, it was sort of the egg capital of at least the West. And so eggs would ship out of here. And so that caboose commemorates the white eggs that sort of made Draper famous. So there were a lot of chicken coops here, and there still are a few around on some folks' properties, but it was dominated by chickens for many years. So that is kind of our historic park our main park is a little bit straight east of this building. The oldest structure, one of the oldest structures, if not in the valley, is a cabin it's not where it actually was. It was actually a little farther over behind me to the west, about where the old school is, roughly those garages. That's where the infamous Porter Rockwell lived and worked in whatever it is he did out of Draper for a number of years. This is kind of our main area of town. So our big park is over there. Draper Days happens at the park just to my east. We're about a month away from that. We bring about 40,000 people every day into the 2 days into the park. So it's big production for us. But this is kind of where it all happens. Our city hall has been here for a while. So the building's over 20 years old. It's the newer part is there's a part out here behind me that's our police wing. We built that a few years ago. But this has served us well for a long time. It's a nice building, and we've really enjoyed it. As you know, we're about 51,000 people is our estimated population. Our area, for the most part, is built out. If you were to look at an aerial map, there are very few large parcels left in the city. Most every parcel is taken up and is built. There's a few areas left, but not very many. We've just completed our station area plan on the track station where the caboose that I was talking about, the egg caboose. That station area plan was approved by Wasatch Front a few weeks ago, and it encompasses City Hall. There's some vacant land directly east of us that we bought as part of the station area plan as it came to fruition. Ivory Homes is building some new homes out here to my southeast. They're on quarter-acre lots or smaller. None of them are affordable, but they're going up. They're selling them all. But our city hall and this vacant 10 acres we have that goes over to the library in our park, along with UTA's property to the north of the tracks line, is our first stationary plan. Our second stationary plan is close to be going to Wasatch Front. It's on our tracks line. It's called Kimball's Junction or Kimball's Lane. And then we have one more, which is out at the Front Runner Station, which is on the west side where eBay built its big building. So, of course, our big future opportunity for us is the Point. If you're not familiar with the Point, it's where the prison used to be. The prison site, as we call it now, the Point, is all within inside the city limits of Draper, and that develops. It'll become part of our city. It's a unique development in the sense that the state government owns the land, and the state government intends to continue to own the land. So all of the construction development that will occur there, other than perhaps some potential for sale housing that is sort of in the discussion, will be owned by the state of Utah and operating on a lease basis. So it's unique, but the infrastructure, which is substantial, is under construction right now. I'm talking roads, substantial storm drain, stormwater, and culinary water is about to start this next week. It's a big project. It's about 700 acres, depending on how you count it. Phase 1 is under construction, so phase 1's about 68 acres. And in phase 1, that's going to be the kickoff of the item. It'll have a trail system called the River to Range Trail System, which I'm proud of, that will connect the Jordan River Trail all the way through the prison site, the point all the way over the freeway to the Porter Rockwell Trail, which is a paved trail that connects Lehigh and Draper and points south. It'll open up Corner Canyon, so people that live in the point will be able to access Corner Canyon over a pedestrian way that you could essentially be working at the point, take your lunch hour and go ride Corner Canyon or hike it or however you want to do. So it has the potential to be a really awesome connection and continue with our quality of life. Corner Canyon is out here to my southeast. The city, over in 2 purchases, preserved Corner Canyon. The first was an 11-acre purchase that the voters did in a bond. We bought the 13 acres for about $13 million. Is kind of saved the middle of the canyon from home development. And then a few years after that, in 2017, we, as a council member then, we ended up having an opportunity to buy 2,400 acres of open space that would ultimately been Suncrest development. So if you look up on the mountain, part of the deal on the Suncrest development was you weren't supposed to be able to see any of those houses that you can clearly see from here. But, you know, that was supposed to have another 5,000 residential units on it. So it has about 3,000 now. It had 5,000 more. But the developer went bankrupt and we got into a big lawsuit with Zions Bank. And then over time, we ended up settling it by buying 2,400 acres for $5.6 million. We sold 110 acres of it for 7.3, and so we paid off our bond and built a bunch of new trailheads and a bunch of miles more trail. And so we felt like we were lucky from that. But we have about 5,000 acres of open space that the city owns. Most of it is in a conservation easement, which is held by Salt Lake County. Salt Lake County holds conservation on even property that's in Utah County. So the conservation easement extends into Utah County. We just put, just last week, 255 more acres into the conservation easement, which is essentially Deer Ridge Drive and a big top of the mountain. It's our 4th dog park. I don't know how many of you have 4 dog parks, but we do. And I still get complaints that we need another dog park. This dog park is an off-leash mountaintop dog park, so it's 255 acres. It just got added to our conservation easement. So we have preserved this part of the valley, at least the canyon, the mountains. We have various trails. We have mountain bike trails that are mountain bike only. We have multi-use trails, which are everything. We have horseback trails. We have walking trails that are just walking and horse. So we have a mix. It's a good mix that we've worked on really hard to make sure that all users have an opportunity to use the canyon without having a mountain bike screaming down at you at, you know, high rates of speed. But the canyon's important to us. We like it. It's really part of what we think makes Draper awesome. So really, that's kind of a little bit of a history about us. We're excited to continue moving. We're excited for the point. That's sort of our big economic building future. We'll see how it goes. If you're not familiar, get on their website, point.com, and you can see what the plans are. It's a very unique development with a whole different set of development different than we've done. So we're excited. Like I say, that's really all I can tell you. Welcome again. If any of you ever decide you'd like to ride our trails, I have city mountain bikes. I could take some of you on. Be happy to take you up there. They're e-bikes, so you don't have to be, you know, in perfect mountain biking shape. But I've taken lots of people and shown them the canyon. We can do it for you too. So other than that, that's all. That's my welcome. Next item. We don't have one for you. Yeah, you have to ride your bike only. No, we do. I have a few that I use for take people out on. Then our police have a set of them. We also have a unique thing. Our open space is protected by an officer that's dedicated to the open space. He has a Ford Bronco, super cool. It's been in a few car shows. He also has an e-bike, and his job is to ride the canyon every day, and he does. So if you're in the canyon, you'll run across him. He writes tickets for dog off leash, which he does a fair amount. he writes, he'll write a ticket if you're up there on a vehicle you're not supposed to be on. We always are looking for fireworks. This is the time of year I hate because everybody's buying fireworks soon and they'll be lighting fireworks soon. And we've had one fire this year. It was a man caused. It was a couple weekends ago. Well, it was a weekend ago, not this weekend, but last. It got contained really quickly. But I just want to reiterate, for us, fire danger is a big deal and we're concerned about it. But I have, like I say, we are more than happy to show you around, show you the canyon from that perspective. So brand new trail, I will say in closing, just opened, called the Mayor's Trail. And it's a trail in honor of the two mayors that made it happen, Mark and myself. It's a mountain trail that connects Lehigh and Draper. And so we decided the Mayor's Trail was a good, we've had a very good working relationship with Lehigh, not with just paved trails, but our mountain trail access. Lehigh's caught the vision for trail construction. And you could now, between Draper and Lehigh, you could get up on a bike and ride all day and never go on the same trail. I mean, it's fantastic. Some of their trails that tie into ours are as beautiful as any there are. So it's a great partnership it's just getting better, and we have more and more of them. So anyway, all right. Next item is a review.
Let me just do the quick introductions. Thank you, everybody, for joining us both online and in person. And thank you, particularly those of you who are not League board members who I invited to join us. We have representatives, Mayor Walker and the rest of the League board here from that represent the League on the Commission on Housing Affordability. We have folks from Wasatch Front Regional Council, and we also have folks who represent the League on the Land Use Task Force and on the Commission and on the State Housing Plan work groups. So because we have a lot to go through, we're not going to go through and do full introductions. But Mayor Walker, if it's all right, when we get to the section of the agenda where we'll be talking through housing and land use pieces, I think we should invite them to participate, and we can bring microphones to them so they can participate during that portion of the meeting. I will note, we sent you the packet on Friday. We were still working through that packet through Friday morning because of a lot of moving parts, both in DC and in Salt Lake, around the various policy proposals that are out there. So we do have a lot to get through in the next hour 40, and welcome your participation. So we need to approve the budget. So we need to do that today. And then when we get to the policy proposals, both in DC and in Salt Lake, we'll need to get as much feedback from you as possible, because you as a board don't meet in July. As during my time as League director, we've never had a July meeting. If by the end of today's meeting you feel like we really do need a July meeting, then we can discuss that. Otherwise, we'll take July off and come back in August, but there'll be a lot of moving parts between now and that August board meeting. So we'll get through as much as we can today. So that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you to do administrative items, and then we'll open the public hearing for the budget.
As soon as I'm chewing, he turns it back over. All right, let me remind you, if you want to talk, the mics have a button there, turn them on. If you leave them on, it'll pick it up. So when you're talking, hit the green button and turn it off when you're ready. So first item on the agenda to cover, or I guess the second item, is approval and review and approval of our minutes from our last meeting, May 19th, 2025. All right, Mayor Trans made a motion to approve. Is there a second? All right, Mr. Dugan's made a second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, that is passed unanimously. Item 3, you want to do this first before the public hearing? Okay, or before public comment?
Yeah, I'm going to open the public hearing in case there.
But on this, okay, all right. All right, item 3 is a public hearing from the sense of it's our fiscal year 2026 tentative budget for consideration. It is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address?
I make a motion that we go into public hearing.
Yeah.
I move we go into public hearing.
Okay, motion to go into a public hearing. Second. All right, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, we're in a public hearing. All right, do you want to take public comment now? Or?
Yep, there is.
Is there any public comment? Anybody online? Any in the public here? Seeing any? Any online, Justin?
We do have some folks attending online, as Cam mentioned, but I do not see any hands up for any comment on the budget online.
All right. Is there a motion to close the public hearing? Is that how we do it?
I move we close the public hearing.
Second? All right, second. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, public hearing's closed. Now, we have the 2026 tentative budget and memo for May 19th, 2025. Who's leading out on this one? Go ahead, Nick.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Let me just get to that. So you all in May approved a tentative budget that we just held the hearing on. We have a few small changes to the final budget that we're bringing before you that you had approved, the tentative budget you had approved in May. All of these changes revolve around changes to the technical assistance programs that we plan on running next year. If you recall from the tentative budget, we had $800,000 coming from DWS over 2 years, $50,000 from the Office of Data Privacy. That grant from DWS has actually been reduced to $700,000 over 2 years, and there have been some changes to how we can apply our 10% de minimis indirect cost recuperation, otherwise known as a admin fee, to that money. So we had to move some things around slightly. You can see all of that there. DWS technical assistance down to 700 from 800. Unrestricted reserve revenue, we need to increase from 293,000 from 270,000. That's an increase of $23,000. We are going to have less money than we initially projected for LAA next year. Still totally works with everything we've walked through, but we are just changing the amount of revenue we're bringing in from restricted reserves for that, down by $13,000. And then also the amount that we will spend minus the administrative fee. We make that adjustment as well. And then changes to restricted fund expense that we were planning on putting half the money into next year for DWS. That line item is gone, and we've lowered the amount for the DWS technical assistance as well. So overall, that reduces the budget, the final budget that we have here, down $90,000 from the tentative budget that you've approved. Like I mentioned before, we are increasing the amount of unrestricted reserve revenue that we are planning on using. That should not make a major change to the percentage of reserves that we will have on board. Last month, we told you that we were projecting that we'd be about 48% of reserves based on those numbers, and now we're going to be somewhere, depending on how the end of this year, this week really shakes out, we'll be between 47 and 48%. So not a significant change there. And those are all the changes. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, seeing no questions or any discussion?
I'm sorry, I didn't push fast enough on questions. Nick, I think it might just be helpful for the board to talk about the target you're hitting on the unrestricted and making sure that we send those down to the appropriate level that we're allowed to keep and roll forward. Because it can look like we're spending a lot, but we're trying to hit a target on purpose.
Yes, yes, indeed. So as you're all familiar, you all have caps in your general funds of how much reserve funding you can have. And I believe that's 35% for the larger cities. Sorry? Oh, yes. We have a self-imposed, we're an enterprise fund, so we technically do not have to have a cap on our reserves. But for good policy, we have a self-imposed policy that our reserves, our unrestricted reserves must remain between 25 and 50% of the previous year's general revenue. And that way we don't have dues raising every year and just saving up a whole bunch of money going past that 50%. But we also make sure we at least have a quarter of a year in reserve. So at the end of last fiscal year, we were at that 50% threshold. So we knew coming into the next fiscal year, we're going to have to spend some of those down. We had initially done $270K. Now we're going to be at $293K, and that'll take us from at the end of this fiscal year, we're actually looking to be a little above 50. That'll take us down to between 47 and 48%. So still have a sizable amount of reserves in case we need to use those, but just making sure we're compliant with our policy.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? All right, is there a motion? All right, we have motion and a second to approve our tentative budget. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approval, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, that passes. Next item is adoption of the 2026 budget. Cameron, go ahead, sir.
Nick, I'll turn. Nick, and I'll give it back to you. Is there anything else you need budget-wise? Anything else?
No, I'm sorry. I thought we were on that item. So nope, that is all we need for the final budget.
So, yeah, we just approved it, so we're good.
All right, do we need a motion
Oh,
on that?
we will need to, I'm sorry, we will need to adopt the resolution. That is the mechanism by which we are required to adopt our budget. And so you can see there is a resolution in your packet. And so we would like the motion to be to adopt this to pass the resolution adopting the fiscal year 2026 budget.
All right, is there a motion to pass a resolution adopting the budget? Motion, second? All right, we got a second. Are there any further discussion? All in favor of adopting the budget, formally say aye. Any opposed? All right, that's passed unanimously. Item 5 is next. It's ULCT Board and Commission reports and appointments. Alexa?
All right. Good
There you go.
afternoon, everyone. Lovely to be here with you all in Draper. I have 2 boards and commissions items on the agenda for us today. First, you might remember that my first board meeting with you all back in January, you appointed Councilmember Tish Baracker of Riverton to serve on the Utah Substance Abuse and Mental Health Advisory Committee. Councilmember Baracker no longer has the capacity to serve on that board, necessitating the need for a new appointment to both the Utah Substance Abuse and Mental Health Advisory Committee, USAFE, and its Beer Tax Subcommittee. You could read both about more of those on the Boards and Commissions memo, but I'm happy to go into further depth on those if you wish. We are recommending as staff that you appoint Carla Weiss of Springville to fill this vacancy on both USAVE and the Beer Tax Subcommittee. Carla will bring passion and experience to both USAVE and the Beer Tax Subcommittee, as she's a former substance abuse counselor for juveniles who work with teens in treatment for mental health and substance abuse issues for years. Next, Governor Cox last month established the BUILD Coordinating Council, which stands for Blueprint for Utah's Infrastructure, Land, and Development. The purpose of the Coordinating Council is to facilitate greater coordination among long-range planning across state agencies and different levels of government to better leverage state investments towards the advancements of statewide goals. The governor's chief of staff requested that Executive Director Cameron Deal fill the seat dedicated to ULCT on the BUILD Coordinating Council. And after consultation with ULCT President Mayor Troy Walker, Cameron tentatively accepted this opportunity to serve on the council on behalf of Utah's municipalities, pending ratification from the ULCT Board of Directors. So in summary, we are recommending as staff that you as the Board of Directors appoint Carla Weiss of Springville City to the Utah Substance Use and Mental Health Advisory Committee and its Beer Tax Subcommittee, and you ratify the appointment of Cameron Deal to the ULCT Executive Director to the BUILD Coordinating Council. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any at this time.
Thank you, Alexa. Any questions?
No questions, but I'm happy to make a motion to approve both of these appointments. These sound like really wonderful assignments. I think they'll both enjoy them immensely, especially Cameron City, I think.
And I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion to approve Cameron City. Is there a second? All right. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving these appointments, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, Cameron City is approved. Finally, after all these years. All right, item 6, engagement report, and we're going to have Molly engage. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to tap in with some of our other league staff here in a moment. So our annual convention is coming up, and Katie, will you just start with a few top line pieces on that?
Registration will open next Tuesday, July 1st, so keep an eye out for that email. Cam, do you want me to say anything about our keynote? Yes? Okay. Our keynote speaker for our opening general session will be best-selling and Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Rick Atkinson, who'll talk about the Revolutionary War, and among other things to kind of go with our theme for the conference. I also want to highlight we're going to be doing a pretty big reception dinner thing in the exhibit hall. We're looking to have a lot of games there, and attendees are welcome to bring their family at no additional cost.
Thank you, Katie. Two other pieces for that. One, following up on some of our conflict competence work, we will be doing, pardon me, a supplemental kind of training day on Friday that folks can sign up for with Danya Ramore on the conflict competence. So if people want to do that, that will be available either as a standalone or as a subsidized rate for folks who are attending annual. So if that's of interest to anyone, we can get you that information. And then finally, this will be one of the years that we highlight our retiring elected officials. So if you or anyone in your communities or areas are not running for office again, we would love to know so we can work on our video that we create, biennially, to highlight those who have served. Moving on, next, NLC, as we've said, will be coming for City Summit this November, the 18th through the 22nd. We're excited to have them. We've been coordinating with NLC and Salt Lake City on that. Want to flag that there will be a reduced rate for Utahns who want to attend. That will be on the Friday of the conference. And we're also looking at organizing some type of state night for folks on that as well. And then finally, Faces, yes. Yeah, I don't have the number in front of me. Do you know it?
They are offering a one-day Utah rate that starts at $125, and then I believe the multi-day rate for Utah folks is $775. You can also, if you just Google NLC City Summit, there's an option that'll take you right to their rate page where you can look at everything and then register if you're interested in going.
Thank you, thank you. And then finally, Faces and Places, Cassidy.
So looking at our guidebook that we've made for Faces and Places, we've had about 466 views on that document, which is really exciting. And we have been featuring some of the bigger stories about Faces and Places in our Friday Facts, including Mill Creek talking about their second part of their city hall, South Salt Lake talking about their new residential building, and a few other places. Some other highlights we've received from other communities is Highland invited Representative Chevrier to a council meeting, and she attended, and they were talking about the general plan there. That was a really great touch point. And then also Representative Fia attended a Riverton Youth Council event. So we are seeing Faces and Places in a lot of different communities and are excited about that. And I guess to add on that as well, I'll be attending the PIO conference in September. It has a lot of your municipal PIOs will be there. And I will be talking a little bit about Faces and Places in one of the general sessions to kind of just bring that all together. Because we know you guys are excited about Faces and Places, but sometimes you need a little help from your comms people to make it happen. So those are what is coming up for Faces and Places.
All right, anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you to Molly and the engagement team for that update. I just want to put a couple of exclamation points on here for the board. How many of you in your cities are doing some sort of America 250 event this summer or in the upcoming year so far? Just a quick show of hands. So I say Clearfield, West Jordan, Kaysville. Tori's thinking about it. Okay. We want to have Santa Clara, thinking about South Jordan, not ahead. Okay. We want to have some, we will have some partnership with America 250 during the conference because 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and we want to celebrate patriotism in a nonpartisan way. So when Katie referenced the author that we've invited, Rick Atkinson, he's in the process of writing a trilogy about the American Revolution and has some incredible insights about the founding fathers and mothers, and we thought it would set a nice tone for the conference. We do also need your help tracking down who is retiring. We've been building a list and we've been following up with municipal clerks, but we want to make sure we recognize those individuals who are moving on to the next chapters of their life. Mayor Johnson, you had a very tender and heartfelt letter to Lehigh City a few weeks ago when you announced you weren't running again. And there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that people have invested in their communities, and we want to recognize that. we also acknowledge that our conference comes before the election, and there will be people running for re-election who won't win. I hope that won't be the case for anybody in this room, but I see a lot of clenched jaws in this room because there's a lot of people who have big summers ahead. So thank you for your willingness to run again. And we're really excited about NLC coming to Salt Lake because we have been trying to make it an event worth attending for Utahns and Westerners. And so when Molly mentioned the state night, part of our thought around that state night is to both invite newly electeds who got elected 2 weeks ago and invite people who are leaving office to come and have a celebration of local government. And so we're still working through those details. And then, Councilmember Winter, I'm glad you brought up the discounted rate because we've had a lot of discussions with NLC. When I say we, it's really Katie and Molly trying to create paths for Utahns to attend at a discounted rate and to recruit Westerners to come to make it more of a regional draw. As Mayor Shepherd, you might be the only one who knows this, but the last time NLC was in Salt Lake City was over 20 years ago. So it's very rare, and we want to take advantage of it. Mayor Shepherd, is there anything you want to add on behalf of the NLC Board of Directors about City Summit or anything related to that? Is your mic on?
No, the board's excited about it. It's fun to hear their comments about coming to Salt Lake and them talking to their cities and in other states and wanting to bring them out here. And so we've had a big push. Obviously, there's we'll call it, Utah has a stigma of being a non-party state. And Mayor Mendenhall has done a really good job of diffusing that and then explaining to people that we actually do have places you can go get a drink and that we'll do our best to facilitate that. It will be interesting because usually where you hold all of the events is at the Salt Palace, and it's a city-owned facility, and we can't have alcohol there. So it will be a little interesting as to how we pull those some of those things together. But we're excited as a board. We're happy to have everyone come to Utah.
Great that they work Salt Lake back into the rotation so we can help here in Utah.
I would like to add just one thing up back in the recognizing the retiring elected officials. I would like to have instead of just a celebration, a roasting of retiring elected officials of mayors that border my southern part of my city if possible. I'd like to be in charge of that if I could be. So I think that only affects one mayor.
Yeah, duly noted.
Thank you.
Duly noted. And then thank you to Cassidy for all the great work on Faces and Places. As we get into the policy section and policy deliberation of this agenda, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to be getting state faces in your places to show them what you're doing and build those relationships of trust. We'll talk more about that later, but we have to execute at a high level of building those relationships, and Faces and Places is the playbook to do it. So with that, Mayor Walker, I'm going to jump into the Executive Director report. And Nick, will you give the announcement about the vacancies, please?
We, as you are all aware, our board rotates every year. We have a nominations committee, and we are required to announce in June what those vacancies are. You will see in Friday Facts this week, we will have a link where folks can actually be nominated and can sign up, let us know if they want to serve on the nominations committee. What you have in front of you here is just a reminder for everyone of where they sit when you joined the board, when your term's up, et cetera. Everything you can see here, if it is highlighted in yellow, that means it is a requirement that we have. If it is highlighted in blue, that means it's an at-large type vacancy. So as you can see, we will be required, we need one person from Area 1, who we currently have Mayor Peterson representing us there. We need one person from Area 5. We currently have Councilmember Baird. And we will need one representative from a town where we currently have Mayor Wright. All of you who are up for, who are terming off the board, you're welcome to be nominated again. But we just want to let you know, get those in if you do want to continue to serve on the board. Councilmember Hinton will be the chair of the nominations committee. It's the funnest job that we give to our our second vice president. So Cam and I will start working with you closely as those things start to go on. But these are the vacancies that we'll be working with. 3 that we will need to fill, and 5 at large, and then also second vice president. You've all been through the process. Many of you have served on the nominations committee, so just let me know if you have any questions.
Perfect. And the fall conference is October 1st and 2nd. So last year it was earlier in September, so calendaring, we had to do all these meetings in August. This year we have a little more breathing room, but Councilmember Hinton, before we separate between you, Nick, and me, let's coordinate calendars. We'll walk you through what needs to happen between now and October 1st.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. Nick, will you head back to the memo? And we're going to take a few minutes here to talk through the league objectives. And I want to thank all of you again for your tremendous feedback when we met in St. George 2 months ago during our strategic session. We as staff take that session very seriously, and we have poured over the feedback both from this year and from the previous 3 years that we've done this. In light of a lot of that feedback and a lot of just the moving pieces of the last couple of months around local administrative advisor and the like, we, as of today, are not prepared to talk about any potential changes or tactics related to league objectives around advocacy, engagement, and operations. As a quick reminder, those are the 3 general categories and divisions of the league, and we have 2 strategic objectives for each of those. But over the last little bit, there's been a lot of moving pieces in the technical assistance space. And to be clear, the league historically has not been in the technical assistance space. We have entered that space through local administrative advisor. And then this spring, unsolicited, we received funding from the Office of Data Privacy and Department of Workforce Services to facilitate other technical assistance. So it does lead to a organizational question of what should our role as a league be in that technical assistance space, particularly under the umbrella of the state housing plan. There are 5 different work groups in the state housing plan, and 4 of the work groups have identified, in large part because of our advocacy, additional technical assistance for local governments. And there's a lot of discussion happening under the umbrella of the state housing plan around how to help small communities that are on the edge of growth deal with the growth, plan for the growth, do capital facilities plans, do everything they need to do to manage that growth. And if that sounds a little like the role of local administrative advisor, yes, there's some overlap for those types of communities. So with that, Molly, can I turn it to you to give some of your perspective? Molly spent a lot of time this spring meeting with AOG directors and leaders and kind of relay some of what we've heard from them. And as I turn it to her, I'll note we are not asking for a vote. Nick, will you scan down to number 3 here? We are not asking for a vote on this language today. We wanted to start the discussion today so that when we come back to you later this summer, we can decide, do we need to add keep going. It's number 3. Do we need to add a 7th objective? And then if so, are we in the right space? Because we don't want to be competing with entities that provide technical assistance. We're trying to figure out what is our lane. Molly.
Thanks, Cam. So last week was the AOG retreat, and McKenna Marchant and I were able to join for part of that. And it was really interesting to meet with both the league directors as well as the folks on the ground providing technical assistance for a lot of rural Utah and smaller communities, and hear from them on kind of their perspective of the league and the value of the league. And one thing that I found pretty insightful from folks in different kind of form and fashion was a lot of people mentioning that when it comes to rural Utah, the advocacy portion of the league is less kind of impactful on the day-to-day operations for their communities as the education, technical assistance, and training, and looking at how the league can better bolster that, consider how that is prioritized, build, et cetera, amid the importance of our advocacy work within rural Utah, which we thought was interesting. This is something that we've kind of been discussing internally in regard to what our kind of objectives are as an organization, and as well our real capacity to take this on as an organization. We're a pretty small staff. I can tell you that while I think the LAA program has been hugely instrumental throughout the state, it's also taken a lot of league resources from myself, Nick, and kind of full-time league staff in addition to our LAA positions. And so really looking to kind of guidance from you all as a board, recognizing there is such a clear need for this. And in many regards, the league is very well positioned to be in this space. And at the same time, we do have very real limits with what we can achieve as an organization and how to best prioritize and balance those priorities.
Perfect. Thank you, Molly. Nick, will you scan down? We've tried to give you as much context as possible in advance to set up these questions, knowing that we were tight on time in the meeting today. So these are the two questions, and we've got about 10 minutes now to discuss them. But again, we're not asking you to endorse anything today. We wanted to give you a chance to weigh in, and some of the comments from the St. George session informed this discussion too. So question number one, thoughts on that potential seventh objective. Is it necessary? Is it outside of our lane? Is it important to keep exploring it and what that should look like? And then what role, if any, should the league have, particularly in the urban edge transitioning role? So Mayor Walker, open that up for discussion for about 8 minutes here.
Discussion is open.
I'll jump in. Since we only have 8 minutes, important to jump in fast. It is interesting to me that, you know, different types of cities need different things from the league. Mm-hmm. And some of this technical assistance in rural areas and in those transition areas has been really key. You know, I don't like the idea of the league needing to spend significant time lobbying for dollars at the legislature to make it happen. But I think it's critical, because if we're not doing some of these things well, then they come back to bite us at the legislature anyway. So I think it maybe would be worth having some great discussion around how we could structure being that technical assistance in a way where, if for whatever reason the funds don't come through, you know, we can kind of cut those things off without too much bleeding, and or that we're also, you know, as part of Faces and Places and other advocacy, reminding legislators that if they want to see certain sizes of communities do certain things, they have to help us help them help us.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. We're both mayors, so I'll take it. As you know, sometimes I ride my bicycle and stop and visit other mayors in some of these smaller towns. And I had some discussions with several of these mayors about this part of the program. And this is extremely important for these mayors in the small towns. When I get there and talk to them, some of them, when they become mayor, they had no idea what it takes to apply for a grant or how to do that. They just don't have the staff that most of us are used to having, that know more than we do when we become the mayor, and they expect that mayor, because they got elected, suddenly knows all the answers to all these things. I think this is extremely critical across the state, particularly for these small communities, but also these larger ones where we can work together and elevate all of us together. So, and I can see the time consumption that's in there. I would not be opposed to having a person dedicated simply just for this, that we hire as a staff person, and that's their sole responsibility.
Well, Mayor Walker, I jump in before Mayor Wright goes. You know, Mayor Burton talked about the additional staff with the local administrative advisor program. There are 2 league staffers, but they're all funded entirely by the state. So that's not our general fund, it's state funds. And so that we created it in that type of model because we knew we didn't have the bandwidth internally, and we didn't want to create a friction within our general fund of how the league is funded for advocacy So having the separate people is a model, all right?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'll say thank you. I am one of the ones that when I was elected, I had no idea what I was getting into. And for a while, there was limited resources, and it was the local administrative assistant that has saved me in no uncertain terms. And without that, I don't believe I could do my job. And that follow-on to that is the multi-million-dollar backlogs I have in water, in roads, in those things. I don't have the mechanism other than my advocacy to our representatives to say, help me, what can you do for me? And I don't have any way to go to the federal government or those things other than I know some of the staffers. Having somebody like Brock and having somebody to, I will say, show me would be a huge benefit. I also am incredibly sensitive to requiring staff that's already overworked, having to get more. And I will say, I believe this is not the responsibility of this organization. I believe this organization, given the money from the state, could execute it. But I believe it's the state legislature and the state government that needs to step up and say, here's the money to help the rural counties and the rural governments out.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the comments here because that, you know, coming from this big city and back to the idea of grants, I don't have to worry about that because we have a whole group to do that. So, but I appreciate the comments, and I also appreciate the comment that on line item D about how do we balance this with the rest of what the league is to do on the political side of the house, and is there a way to have the state fund this but keep a firewall so that this is separate from what the league does? Because, you know, if the state decides to unfund it, then that portion of the league's organization can be separated without impacting the rest of it, and that there's two different items. Now, that's easy to say in writing. It's hard to do in real life because that's how we got our money cut. You know, they were upset, so they cut us $500,000. So they see the importance of it, but then they should support and pay for that support. But we should have to figure out how we make sure there's a firewall between the two groups or the two departments in some way.
Maybe I'm just a little unclear on exactly where that separation occurs, because I think it's been incredibly beneficial for smaller communities to have the training available, like when you come to R6 and that sort of thing. And I think that existed to some degree before this latest push. So I would hope that that kind of knowledge-based help, both on the web and in personal contacts, like with Meg Ryan for land use and the ombudsman, that sort of thing would continue. And I think the league has been in the past the primary sponsor for that. You know, if it's getting more and more in depth, I do think that there is a balance that needs to be met. And we also, in small communities, benefit greatly from the legislative advocacy, because some of the things that have been put forth by the legislature would be equally harmful to small communities as they are to big cities. So maybe I need some more clarification on where you see the push for more time and effort from the league, and where the state stands since they pulled back on some of the funding this past year, where you see that going forward. I hope they would still recognize that it's beneficial to all, especially Molly. I think one of the items that you worked on was the clawback of funds and how much money, especially for these rural communities, some of which weren't even aware that they were missing deadlines, and how much that benefited not only those communities, but probably the state at large.
Perfect. I'm going to address the first piece of it, and then I'll come back to Molly on behalf of McKenna to share the second half of it. Nick, will you go back up in the packet to the league objectives? And right there's great. So advocacy and engagement, our current objectives, and advocacy, you can see it talks about our platform and priorities and maximizing our political capital. Justin's taking the lead this summer, working through modernizing how we approach a policy platform, right? And that's the advocacy arm. In the engagement side, conferences and trainings are really the core function, and then building those relationships. Where this has historically stopped short has been in not just telling you what you need to do, but helping you do it. And the helping you do it piece is what a lot of organizations do now. So Wasatch Front Regional Council, for example, helps communities draft ordinances and actually execute the land use planning. Ditto with Mountain Land Association of Governments. Local Administrative Advisor is not a conference or a training. It is that actual on the ground work. And we've made that work by having a state-funded program with additional employees separate from our base organization, the Firewall that Councilmember Dugan referenced. But there's a lot of interest in, can we do something similar in other ways, particularly in these transitioning areas? And then what should the role of the league? I mean, the state leader asked me last week, so can't the league just be, the clearinghouse for all of these quote unquote bad actor situations? And we do a lot of that informally now. In fact, I mentioned it to the officers this morning. This folder is filled with examples of quote unquote bad actors just from the last week that we've received either from state leaders or from builders. And about half the board is in this packet of where things have arisen. Some are accurate, some are not, some are complete, some are incomplete. But that's the informal piece, but we've always stopped short of saying to Cameron City, we'll do this for you. Instead, we've notified Cameron City, hey, can we help you figure out what the problem is? Okay, here's what you need to do. So it's that next step. And realistically, if we go that next step, there's not bandwidth in our current staffing to do it. And that's where we're trying to figure out, like, what should our lane be? Because state leaders look at LA and say, this has been a great success, even though the funding had a political issue. This has been a great success. Can we replicate this? And can the league still be involved? Well, okay, but there's a significant bandwidth issue that we've laid out in the memo. So we do need to move on to the next piece, but we wanted to report back to you on the strategic objectives piece, because this really is an unanswered question that we need to resolve over the next few months, because a lot of it's being discussed in the housing plan of, well, this is a way we can help transitioning communities. Molly, is there anything else you want to add to wrap up on this one?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, a lot of this is just a huge accolades to both the folks we have on our team, including McKenna Marchant and John Park, and then also the incredible LAAs that you've all been working with, has really, been a huge driver of this success. And Councilmember Winch, your points, I might have misspoken. It isn't that our advocacy work is unnoticed or unappreciated, but I think on the day-to-day pieces, when those basic administrative functions aren't met, it's kind of those legislative updates are more of a nice to have than a have to have. And there was an interesting relation kind of to the Chamber of Commerce someone mentioned, where they were kind of saying the league is like the chamber, and our communities are always members because it's just what you do. But they feel like now more recently with programs like LAA, they're like, no, I'm a member of the chamber because the chamber is there for me and they're delivering this for me, which is exciting. And so it's just figuring out how we prioritize that and balance all of those needs.
Perfect. And then Molly, I'm going to come back to ARPA and get to the big beautiful bill here in just a second. So Mayor Walker.
I guess so. What you're saying is that you have legislators that would like us to become the entity that helps cities implement the new statutes or new laws that are passed, and then goes to a city and says, hey, you're not, like, I'll use my own as an example, as complained about in the folder. Haven't updated our parking.
I showed him his city earlier. That's why he knows he's in the folder.
Haven't updated our parking standards. So what they're asking is that we would administer identifying that or helping people, or that would be a whole new role. I mean, that would be a very unique role for us with our own members. We'd all have to, to be the one policing every little issue the builders have.
So informally, we're doing that now.
Right.
I showed you that earlier, right? So they're asking, is there a way to formalize it? Which then means I like using the term policing. Like, we have no ability to police our members. That's not what we exist to do. That's one of the ideas that they've brought up. But then if you are a community, and Draper's been in the middle of growth for decades now. But if you're a community where growth has just arrived and you don't have full-time staff and you have this huge pressure, how do you help them? And this will sound somewhat sacrilegious, but there were some at the Capitol who viewed the Beehive bill this year as an effort to help those types of communities. Now, that's not what it would have done in its original form, but as we talked to them and they were explaining, I know that it's a mic drop type moment, but but that's what they were saying. It's like, this could actually help Cameron City that's on the edge of growth to have the resources of the state help. And so we're trying to navigate this, and that's why we wanted to have the discussion here, because there's going to be a lot of discussion this summer. We do need to move on to next questions, but we've posed a lot of considerations in the memo about bandwidth and political capital and other things. And so now that you're thinking about this, look at that memo with a second set of eyes, send us your thoughts, because again, we won't be meeting for 2 months and there'll be a lot of moving pieces.
The big, beautiful Beehive bill.
I know, they were just missing one B.
Yeah.
So on the one big, beautiful bill, when we talked federal advocacy back in April, you told us to prioritize transportation funding and tax exempt bonds, and we've already delivered all the information about tax exempt bonds to the delegation. And the good news is, in the House version of the big, beautiful bill, they do not touch the tax exempt status of municipal bonds. And we anticipate the Senate won't touch it either. So that in and of itself is a win for local government. National League of Cities, and you'll see this in your packet, and Nick, you can scan down to the deliberation question. National League of Cities has asked for an action alert on a variety of pieces that are in the House version of the bill. We've gone through them as staff and nuanced where we think it makes sense from Utah League's perspective to get in. We're looking for your ratification before we follow up with our senators on this. So Nick, go down to the 5 questions. We provided some news articles to give you some context. So number 1, thanking them for not repealing tax exemption for municipal bonds. Number 2, the House bill that passed preempts local and state governments around artificial intelligence regulations. And 62 members of the Utah legislature drafted a letter and sent it to the Senate, urging them to repeal that provision. Last Friday, I was on a call, one-on-one call with the White House and their government relations director. I have a monthly call with her, and we were talking through each of these pieces. And she said she was aware that a lot of folks have been pushing back on that provision in the Senate, and our state has already started to regulate AI, and they're concerned about going backwards. So our thought there is we can support what our state legislators have already done. The third piece, this is not in the House bill, but it's a proposal for the Senate bill, and it's garnered a lot of attention, which is why we wanted to bring it up today. And you'll note this says acting at the right time, because if this proposed amendment doesn't go anywhere, then there's no reason to raise the issue. If it does look like it's going somewhere, then we'd want to bring this up. And Senator Mike Lee has proposed identifying a lot of federally owned parcels that could be sold and developed into housing. But depending on who you ask, the map could be problematic, and some of the maps that have circulated include a lot of outdoor recreation amenities and watershed areas and other things. And so our thought here is we've spent a lot of time in the public land space over the last year with the state housing plan. So taking those same principles and applying them to discussions around federally owned land. But again, acting at the right time there and making sure you're not interfering with those outdoor recreation amenities. The fourth piece is the unused or unencumbered funds. Molly, can I turn to you to give a quick update on ARPA, because I think it's a perfect illustration.
Absolutely. And actually, if we have McKenna on as a panelist, I might let her speak to that. She's been spearheading this, and I'd like to give her the credit for that.
Hey, everybody. Absolutely. I can speak to this. Our LAs have been amazing with this. As you all know, they more than pulled their weight, getting in everybody compliant for the 2020 for anybody that hadn't submitted an ARPA report. And then there was a second round of getting everybody compliant after the May 30 deadline. And so our LAs have actually been working again on getting everybody who never submitted a 2025 report compliant. And so with that, there was 36 million at risk of recoupment in 68 municipalities throughout the state. And in conjunction with the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget and our LAAs, we are down to, from the report we received last week, we're down to 3 communities that have not filed their 2025 report, and 54,000 of outstanding funds at risk of recoupment, of which one of our LAAs actually went in and helped these two of these communities that were still outstanding, help them go through the entire process of submitting their reporting, help them push the submit button. So we are anticipating a report coming in this week with those 2 communities off the list. And then there's one community that has 13,000, and they've indicated that they do not intend to spend that they're intending to return that funding to the federal government. So we're actually looking at being 100% compliant in the state with ARPA funding for the 2025 reports and being done with ARPA funding.
Well, thank you, McKenna, for the tremendous work. And I just want to, again, put an exclamation point on what McKenna just said. 2 months ago, $36 million of money at threat of being recouped and clawed back to the federal government. And by week's end, we should be at 13,000, which that community is willing to give back. Molly?
Thanks, Cam. One thing I also just want to flag that kind of ties back to our technical assistance discussion a bit is also just, one, the fact that the state put $2.5 million into this program, and in 1 year it saved over $36 million in federal grant money staying in the state is huge. But also, one of the mechanisms that does work very well, I think, with ARPA as a good example and some of these other pieces of the league being a really solid intermediary, that if McKenna wasn't there, if we weren't working with NLC, these communities would not know they weren't compliant until they got that clawback letter oftentimes. And then we also learn on the ground of other issues that we need to run up to the legislature and things like that. So just wanted to make a note of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Molly. Like, this is the perfect example of the difference between training and technical assistance. And you can see the fruits of McKenna's labors and Governor's Office of Planning and Budget and the LAAs working together under Molly and Nick's supervision to get that done. So you'll notice the wording with number 4 here is encouraging sufficient communication, because in my conversation with the White House on Friday, I think she made really good points of, if you haven't spent this money or planning to spend this money, we want it back. Yeah, okay, fair enough. So let's make sure, though, there's sufficient communication so that you don't have a trap for the unwary from those 68 communities that had spent the money. They just didn't know how to file the reports. Mayor Wright, did you have something you wanted to add there? And then I'll finish with number 5, and then we'll look for a motion, Mayor.
I just wanted to quickly say, this is, to me, the example of where we are. When our treasurer got those letters, she was like, I filed all the reports, we're done. The project ended 1.5 years ago. And it took some further discussion where we went, oh, we're supposed to be doing this every year. Okay, let's get it done. And it was. So those are the kinds of things that happen to these small towns when the treasurer's sitting there going, I did this. Why are you asking me for something a 1.5 years ago? And just thanks to everybody that got us through that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Mayor. Then the 5th item you'll see regards Medicaid expansion and energy tax credits. These are 2 issues the National League of Cities has asked us to engage with the senators on, both senators. We as a league have not really gotten involved in those issues at the state level. So as we're bringing a recommendation to you about what we should do this week, because they're hoping to have a vote on the big, beautiful bill by the 4th of July, is we felt like we haven't been involved at the state level on number 5. So that feels a little outside our lane. Whereas with 1, 2, 3, and 4, we've been involved in those issues extensively at different points in time. So there was some consistency there with what we've done at the state level. So that's our recommendation, open to feedback or a motion.
Is there a motion to ratify the league's position?
So we do have a comment.
Go ahead.
I wanted to just add two
Can you
updates.
introduce yourself for
Yeah,
the record?
from Salt Lake City. I'm Angela Price, the Legislative Affairs Director. Just yesterday morning, Mayor Mendenhall was a co-sponsor on a resolution that moved before the U.S. Conference of Mayors that unanimously passed, and she was a co-sponsor with Mayor McLean from Boise, Idaho, and then Mayor Victoria Woodwards from Tacoma, Washington, and Mayor Burbanker from Lyra, Ohio. And this resolution was calling upon, it was really speaking to Senator Lee's bill on public lands and the importance of protecting public lands here in the Western United States. Specifically, one of our biggest concerns is around wetlands and the Wasatch Canyons. And I'd be happy to share that, that resolution with you. We just found out this morning that it passed. And then we also, our police chief, Brian Redd, this morning has decided to work with other police chiefs across the state on putting together a letter that we're going to send to the federal delegation regarding Medicaid and the importance of Medicaid around unsheltered issues. And so that letter will likely be moving through the Utah Chiefs of Police Association and also through LELC. So if any of your cities are interested in that, you can reach out to me or Kate is our head lobbyist. She, I know you guys all know her directly, so you can reach out to her and she can put you in touch with me as well. The Conference of Mayors resolution is something that we're going to be sharing with the Utah delegation over the next couple of days. And that resolution had the support of over 170 mayors with populations of over 30,000. So we're really grateful that we had that opportunity over the weekend to get that resolution. Thanks for the time, Cam.
I wonder if we might want to think through how we talk about number 3. For any city that borders BLM or Forest Service land, I'm sure you've received plenty of outreaches from constituents on this. As the level of government that's always accessible at home and at church and on the trails, I've certainly received a lot of feedback, and I wouldn't say that Bountiful is a city that's totally surrounded like some of our rural cities in land like this, but it certainly would be helpful. Some of our federal delegation, I think, has done a great job of having conversations with cities. And everyone's story is slightly different. Everyone's needs are slightly different. So they've been having that direct engagement. I've had some good conversations with staff from some of our federal delegation, and some I haven't heard from at all. And so they've left us in an interesting vacuum of information and competing maps, and a proposal on the House side that to me seemed like it had more input from local governments, and a proposal on the Senate side that feels like it's had less. And so having an item C about that is even stronger on the engagement. I don't want to step on any of the toes of a city that has had conversations about some adjacent land for a water project or housing that really makes sense, or road needs. But I certainly have 2 parcels circulating on maps that would make for the most expensive luxury cabins in the middle of a beautiful forest on trail hubs that we've ever seen. I'm not really excited about.
Nick, can you scan down in the board packet to 2 pages down, a section on the publicly owned land piece? And I was trying to make this one more down. Yep, keep going. Yep, next one. Right here, this is good. Obviously, there's a lot of text up here, but we spent a lot of time last fall in the board meeting talking about publicly owned land and what that relationship should be like between state government, local governments. Now, what I'm hearing you say, Councilmember Bradshaw, is kind of that, just applying that same engagement and partnership concept on the federal side too. So basically having a C, I'm not going to try to wordsmith in front of everybody, but basically a C that encompasses that based on, Nick, can you slide it over so people can see what we discussed on that number 2?
Guessing it's in the blue box.
Yeah, yep, the blue box. Yeah, so the last year we talked about board of directors input was open to required inventories with parameters, because cities don't want to be required to develop a planned park into housing, but open to surplus parking. And then you get down to number 3, figure out how the development fits within city infrastructure and zoning. So it's that concept of we need to be working together at this, not having to drop down on us.
Yes, I think that captures sort of what I'm thinking, along with the fact that nobody knows their area like a city does. Nobody understands where the infrastructure stops and starts, or how communities are currently using public space like those local governments. And so something that doesn't take into account the absolute partnership that would be needed would really miss the mark and potentially be a waste of public assets, collective national public assets.
Yep, so I think that kind of combining this page with what we wrote 2 pages earlier. So those are our recommendations. And if you're willing to ratify those, then we can follow up with the delegation this week, particularly the senators, because they're the ones that need to consider the big, beautiful bill Senate version. And then we'll go to the conference committee concept at the federal level to figure out what the final bill will be. You'll also note the letter that's being circulated to your police chiefs. You know, the language we have before you is not opining as of now on Medicaid expansion and energy tax credits, because they're not league policy priorities. We have been very involved in the homelessness space, so we could revisit that based on that link to homelessness, depending on what happens over the next few days. But that's our recommendation, Mayor, if that works for the board.
I just have one question. Do all of these parcels so identified have infrastructure to them?
No.
Oh, so you're talking about a whole bunch of potential units without infrastructure.
Where have we heard?
Seems like we might be in that situation right now with 190,000 entitled units.
Yes.
Okay, I was trying to figure it out, sorry.
So Nick, will you go up so they can see the question and then open to a motion on the deliberation question? Yep.
We get a damn motion?
I'll move.
I'll move. I'll make a motion to ratify these 5 with the addition of a 3C, as we've discussed, that the league staff will craft to place appropriate emphasis on coordination with local governments. Partnership, not preemption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the damn motion. Is there any further discussion?
Just one question on number 5, talking about the police chiefs and the Medicaid expansion. We can revisit that on that, okay? As far as the motion is concerned. Okay, perfect. All right, I appreciate it.
Yes, that's my recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you. Cam mentioned on the AI piece, that the letter from our legislature about the AI, you know, the 10-year moratorium on our own ability to legislate that. Cam mentioned supporting the letter that the House and Senate sent, but I support it because I think it's in our best interest as individual communities. And so I agree with that letter strongly, and I think it is in our best interest to be supportive of that. Glad the legislature sees it that way too, but I think it's in our best interest. So I think that's a good idea.
Mayor Burton?
I'm in support of this as well, but I think we got to be careful as we work further into getting into federal policies. Is that the role we want the Utah League of Cities and Towns to be, or do we want to keep that more at the National League? Which is something that we probably ought to talk about.
it seems to me, Mayor Burton, that, often, there's some distance between local governments and the federal government because we have this other entity, states that sit between us. But they have brought forward a bill and put a whole bunch of things in one bill. And
Beautiful.
I think it's less beautiful than some others may think it is. But they've put in a lot of things that are kind of right in our wheelhouse. The muni bonds on the House side, those are things in our wheelhouse. Housing and infrastructure, and those things are in our wheelhouse. And in some ways, I think, just as we sometimes push back against our friends at the state level about, what's our lane and what's their lane, to me, the federal government has crossed over into our lane a bit more than they usually do. And so some outreach and reminders of what we do and why we do it, and that we do it best at this level, might be helpful. I think it should probably be a more rare thing that we, engage in this way, but there's enough things in this bill that touch our sphere that I would advocate for the outreach.
All right, I agree. So I think we should restripe the lanes to make them clear.
Can I ask you a question, Cam? Have you spoke to our friends at the county, like at UAC, on what they're doing with the public land stuff? Because at least for Summit County, most of it falls into our county versus like up in the Uintas.
Yeah, thank you, council member. I have had some conversations with UAC. I was waiting to take the temperature of this room first, because if we weren't going to engage at all, then we weren't going to engage at all. Where I'm expecting the vote to go is yes, engage in this framework, and then we'll follow with those different partners. What I tried to convey to the White House on Friday was that there was a lot of interest in Utah to repurpose certain types of federal land, whether that's private ownership, state ownership. Like, that concept has a lot of interest here. How you do it matters, and the way it's coming about right now has a lot of these practical consequences on cities. So I'm trying to find that nuance between the concept and the practicality. And I think from a city perspective, and I'm just using Park City example, like, Park City has a lot of federal land on your doorstep, and the county has a lot of public land within the county. And sometimes your interests align and sometimes they don't. And so trying to navigate all of that is going to be part of the fun.
Is there a vote? Is there a vote on the motion? We're ready to take a vote on the motion. We've got a motion and a second. All in favor of ratifying the league's position on these items as moved, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, that passes. And item 8 is next. Advocacy report.
Perfect. We've got more deliberation questions for you here. Nick, will you scan down and just start here for a second? We're not going to go through this document during this meeting. I want to thank Cassidy and team and Alexa for putting this together. What's on the left is what we presented to you last year in 2 different board meetings, and what's on the right is basically the progress report. So you can go through it and see that what you asked us to do last year and the lines you asked us to hold and the proposals you asked us to push forward, you can see on the right that we've made a lot of progress in that space around condos and short-term rental regulations and the like. The second page of this is that public land piece, and we've already talked a lot about it. That is still very much a focus of the state housing plan. And then, Nick, will you go to the third page of this document? This is basically around House Bill 368. You can stop there, Nick. And I'm going to come back to the process piece because a lot of the focus on development standards right now really is the next step from that piece. And then, Nick, go to page 4, and this is ADUs and by right density. Nothing happened in either of these 2 spaces last session, but as Mayor Palmer knows, having sat through a lot of these work group meetings this summer, this is front and center, both of these 2 items within the state housing work group. And so we need to check in with the board, since we won't see you for 2 months, to get some general direction as the negotiations continue in the off season. As a reminder of what you've got up here on the screen, When we've surveyed our members about accessory dwelling units, and I'm talking detached, allowed by right in statute, so basically what House Bill 88 was last session, there's a lot of opposition from the membership. And we've reflected that at the Capitol, and we've won that at the Capitol. When we've asked it with a little more nuance, you can see one group was just a group of 19 league members, another group of 69 league members. Neither of these are scientific. Carson would want me to emphasize that. But when we've asked questions around potential state standards around ADUs, our feedback has been more mixed depending on who we're asking and how we ask the question. On the by right density, you can see it's been overwhelmingly opposed. And what is listed there, and this question we asked the LPC had 131 respondents back in January of 2024, but basically saying by right density everywhere so long as a percentage are deed restricted to be price capped and owner occupied. And yeah, Mayor Palmer, how many times have you heard that concept come up this summer? Every meeting. And that's both on the Commission on Housing Affordability side and on the state housing work plan. But you can see only 13% of our members said they were somewhat comfortable. We actually had 2 people in that survey who said they were very comfortable, and then everybody, a handful. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. But you can see it was overwhelmingly concerned about it. But that concept is back. Now, we supported House Bill 37 last year, which created a tool for U.S. cities to zone affordability and ownership requirements. Carson was actually just doing a training while we've been meeting here with the APA Utah chapter and a bunch of planners talking through House Bill 37 and MIHP requirements. So he'll give us a report on that later. But anyway, these are still front and center. So Nick, keep going. So in the memo, we outline all the different housing work groups. There are 5 under the housing work group, plus unofficial ones. Then you have the land use task force. And then Nick, if you keep going down to number 4, you'll see that between now and when the board next meets on August 18th, we have 4 housing advisory subgroups. So we invite all of you to be part of those subgroups. That's where we're trying to do the deeper dives and get a sense of what makes sense to the membership. And so we invite you to join us. We have 2 meetings thus far and 4 between now and then. I think it's also important to recognize that since we last met, you've had several states that have preempted local governments, and the Ivory Innovations organization is actually giving their annual prize to the organization that sponsored the preemption in the state of Florida. And they'll be doing that ceremony in Salt Lake City on October 29th with Governor Cox. Okay, so that's where we're at. And I know a lot of you were at the governor's event at the mansion a few weeks ago. We don't have time to go into that, but this again comes back to why Faces and Places is so absolutely critical to help folks understand what's happening on the ground. Cassidy's also been working on some buttons that say partnership, not preemption, with the state of Utah behind it that we want to distribute at the National League of Cities Conference for the national audience and to our members. I'm seeing enough head nods that Cassidy, I think we're okay to proceed with that unless somebody tells us otherwise. We will press buy for those buttons. And then we mentioned that this folder's full of anecdotes of examples, some of which are complete, some of which are incomplete, of quote unquote bad actor cities, which we talked about a lot in April and in May. So with that as background, we've got about 25-ish more minutes and at least 2 deliberation questions we have to get through, number 1 and 2. Nick, if you keep going down, just go to Roman numeral 4A.
Are you open to any other button suggestions that we could
In
work?
30 seconds, I will.
Okay.
Yeah,
They
30
can't have
seconds.
swear words on the mayor.
So I mentioned that Mayor Palmer's been one of our representatives on Housing Work Group 3, which has been focused on zoning. Springville Mayor Matt Packard has also been representing us there, and he's one of our 2 reps on the Commission on Housing Affordability. We also have Councilmember Don Shelton from South Jordan, who's here, and he's been involved in the work group that's been talking about infrastructure standards. So those are the 2 things we have to get through in the next half an hour, is the ADU piece and the infrastructure standard piece. There's a lot of discussion around some sort of state standard on ADUs. we wanted to have a better understanding of what the status quo was. So Carson on our team and Alexa and a few others have spent a lot of time the last few weeks doing a deep dive on ADU ordinances that cities have adopted. And about 70% of cities that are currently MIHP cities allow detached ADUs in some form or fashion. It's certainly not universal how you do it, but about 70% do. And then as he's been following up with that remaining 30%, some are starting a process now, and then others are quite militant that they don't want ADUs, period, end of story, and have different reasons for that. He has not had the bandwidth to follow up with communities that are not MIHP cities, and that's cities under 5,000, which is 60% of our membership. So particularly in rural Utah, we don't have a good sense of who allows detached ADUs and who does not. We've gathered the list, so Nick, you can keep going down. We've kind of given you the background of what we've heard over the last few weeks, but between now and the next board meeting, we need to decide, are we going to hold the line as we've done with House Bill 88 and just no state standard around detached ADUs, or are we willing to explore a path forward? Don't know necessarily what that path forward looks like, but a path forward of some sort of standardization around ADUs. And the argument being made by the governor's office and others is that if there's one process or standards are more consistent between communities, that makes it easier for people to ultimately develop the ADUs and could open the door to a funding stream to help people build ADUs, and it starts to become as much a property rights issue as anything. I'll pause there. Mary, you said you had something you wanted to add, and then we want kind of the feedback from the board of is there an appetite to look at a potential path forward over these next few weeks with some kind of standardization?
I was just going to say on the ADUs, especially the detached ADUs, I do think I think this might be a good area for us to come to some agreement on. Like it's an area it's an area where we can make a lot of friends and probably, make a difference in some ways. It's actually real and doable. So I think we should consider, if we're going to go into the session negotiating about something in the housing world, this is better than ADUs by right. Obviously, we could get something that we could all live with. Now, to the cities who don't want them, I think this is a space where we could put our heads together relatively easily and come up with a standard for them that would work. That's my 2 cents on it.
Then, Mayor, we have Mayor Packard from Springville, who represents us on the Commission on Housing Affordability. He has his hand up. He's at a work conference out of state, but I appreciate him calling in. So while Nick's promoting him to panelist, Mayor Packard, we should be able to hear you now. If you can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we've spent quite a bit of time on this internal as well as external ADUs. And we've chased the funding for financing internal and external ADUs. And we've reported back to Steve that the funding source for internal ADUs is quite well established and is something that is, I think, in state code and certainly should be, I think, encouraged by most cities. External ADUs, we have reported back to him and told him that we cannot find reasonable conventional funding to do external ADUs on separate pieces of property, in essence, subdividing the parcel and making 2 separate parcels. That's how that ADU discussion ended up last week. So I think that the discussion for the board is to determine whether they should support internal ADUs and external ADUs in their cities. We have told them that from an external ADU standpoint, number-wise, that there's probably not going to be a lot of numbers to try to get the the number of housing units in the state of Utah increased. We don't think that that's a very viable way. That's what we've reported to them, but that's just some information that may help you in your decision.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Packard. Other thoughts from the group?
Chair, if I could also comment, I would agree with what you said, Mayor Walker, that this is, we're already 70% there, cities. This is the easy one to check off and say, we're doing our part. Let's get some guardrails on it, rather than, I think this is one that's going to go through anyways. That's my feeling coming out of that. But if we can come to the table and get guardrails around it, then I think this is an easy. We've started that process. For us, this was, Harriman just started this process already, kind of, I guess, seeing the writing on the wall as well. So I think it's one to get, this is an easy one to check off and go with.
Did I understand that right? They want to subdivide the parcel so that have two separate owners? Then it's really not an external ADU, right?
So that is what Farmington has done. That's the first one in the state that's done it, and one of the first in the country. And basically, you create the ADU in your backyard, detached ADU in the backyard, but then instead of renting the ADU, you sell the ADU and the property underlying. So it becomes a subdivided spot, so it becomes a second unit. So I think this is, I don't want to get too caught up in the weeds here, because the guardrails that Mayor Palmer is talking about is at a higher level. This is one example of what a city can do right now without any sort of state code. The question is, if we say, okay, we're willing to discuss some state guardrails, and you see them listed in the packet, like these are all the different things that our members have told us over the last few weeks. Can we craft a framework based on those guardrails that most of our cities are doing anyway, and figure out what that looks like? I'm not sure we can, to be clear, right? Like, you look at this list, and Mayor Johnson, sufficient infrastructure is up there, and you and I have had that conversation forever. There's some really tough unanswered questions there, but that specific example is really like the Farmington model. That's not the type of guardrails that Mayor Palmer is talking about. Mayor Packard was bringing it up in the context of how to help a homeowner finance the creation of an ADU, whether that's an internal ADU, a traditional detached ADU, or a subdivided ADU.
Mayor, we're going off on into the weeds. We don't want to talk about that right now. We'll stick back to the ADUs and the external ADUs.
So is there a consensus from the group to work towards some guardrails on detached ADUs? That we have a state, if we can come up with a standard?
Ooh, consensus might be a little bit hard to get to. Here's why. Here's my thoughts on this. Internal ADUs, they weren't necessarily easy, but a lot of our residents in our neighborhoods were able to absorb them because they maintain the look and feel of a single family home. It doesn't feel like you now live next to a duplex, and you have the owner occupancy standard. But in a lot of ways, an internal ADU is a duplex. An external ADU is really visible proof. And I think that becomes harder for neighborhoods when you see that going in. And so the reaction we will get from residents, particularly at the council level, will probably be a bit different. It isn't a reason not to engage in the discussion, but I think people will see them differently because they can see them and they can't see the internal ADU.
Adding a thought to that, I think what challenge that we will run into with external is how close they are to literally my backyard. Speaking of that NIMBY effect, and so this is a really good discussion, but I think the external will be harder.
And Nick, can you scan up a little bit so you can see all of the little Roman numerals here? So these are the list of topics that we've heard as we've been doing the outreach over the last little while, and you'll notice little Roman numeral 11, little Roman numeral 12 gets to the rights of neighbors, the size of ADU, which gets the proximity and the visibility piece. So we've tried through our outreach to build out all of the policy considerations and then say, okay, is there a path forward? Now, a path forward doesn't necessarily mean a bill. In our most recent work group meeting, it came up with, well, what if we just have best practices, and you say cities have to do an ordinance, but then you leave the specifics to the city and share best practices. Like, there are multiple ways to go down that path. But what we needed to make sure, and I say we, it's not just we as staff, it's Mayor Packard and Mayor Palmer and Councilmember Dugan and Mayor Silvestrini and everybody who's involved in these conversations. Are we comfortable as a group engaging in that path forward? Because up till now, my answer in all these meetings have been no. If we're saying we're open to this discussion, but we're not committed to what it looks like yet, but we're open to it, okay, then we can proceed based on this outline of topics.
Go ahead. If the implication to this is just that we're creating an opportunity to have a dialogue and discover if there's any innovation outside of this room, I'm totally receptive to that. It's possible there's someone smarter than I am, or, well, obviously in this room there is, but that might have another idea. So I'm very receptive to the conversation, knowing all the concerns I have, even having just compared accessory buildings across different cities, and this was impossible to find standards there, and this is even harder than that. So, but if somebody else has some great ideas, I want to support a conversation, so long as we're not saying, yes, we can find some bill. I don't know if there is a standard, but open to the conversation. Can we position it closer to that vagueness? I don't know.
I think a path forward, like you mentioned, could be that every city has to have some sort of ADU policy. I would be comfortable with that, because Kaysville, we don't have one yet. We've tried several times to get it. I think since I was planning, like in the last 8 years, probably brought this forward probably 4 or 5 times in council. And we have council members that just say, no, we don't want to do that. And I said, this is coming. This is going to be required of us. Let's get in front of it. So I do think that's an appropriate conversation to say every city should have a policy, making it, allowing for flexibility within the policy, I think is appropriate.
Can I ask a question about something that Mayor Packard said? Mayor, you said in the last week that, reporting back to Steve or whoever, funding for external ADUs was a challenge. Does that mean government funding to pay for people to put an ADU in their backyard? Because we don't pay for housing as government. And if we come up with a way, or every city has their own way, if you want an external ADU and you decide you want one, you pay to build it. Are we talking about having government funds available to build it? Because that I don't like.
So 2 quick answers to that, Mayor. One is private financing. So if I'm a property owner, actually, I see Mayor Packard's hand up. So Mayor, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, what I was trying to explain is that internal ADUs are easier to finance. It's quite conventional. External ADUs, you can do it, and you're forced into perhaps refinancing or home equity loans. They are conventional. This is not government funding coming from the cities, counties, or state. The question that we said back to Steve is almost impossible to finance is that the question was home ownership. Instead of having the external ADUs as rental units, have them as owner occupied units. And that's where it's almost impossible for us to find financing. So external ADUs that are owner occupied, in essence, subdividing your property, is not a practical way to do it. I hope that made a little bit more sense.
All right, do we have enough consensus by motion to go forward with maybe a policy that everybody's got to have a policy, or there has to be a policy for ADUs?
Let's just say yes.
The chair.
Path forward is all. How about just path forward to talk?
Chair Walker, is
Yes,
it
sir.
okay if I just make a comment real quick?
Yes, sir.
Get my button pushed.
You are a lame duck, but go ahead, sir.
Sorry. You know,
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to say something that's probably going to be contrary to what I've said in the past, Cameron. We've had a lot of conversations because we're very aware of the additional pressure on infrastructure in Lehigh in regards to any type of ADU. But I will tell you, I think it's really important we all get on the same page. I'll tell you why is because just like in 2008, when we had our last building crunch, when people couldn't get into a home, we're experiencing that now. It didn't stop growth at all. Growth continued to happen. It just, people were living in basements. If you went to any of the Parade of Homes lately. We're seeing a new term, multi-generational housing. If we don't figure it out, builders are going to figure it out. They're going to find a way to get around the rules no matter what they are. We need to establish, I think, coordinated rules that do span all cities, and it's going to be difficult. I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's going to be difficult. But we need to find a way to cover ourselves as cities, how to provide not only the infrastructure, but everything else. And I agree with what Mayor Packard said. I don't see any way in the world that anybody's going to be able to finance an unattached unit on the same lot. And if whatever's being done elsewhere where there's actually subdividing the lot, I think that's caused us additional problems or the potential of additional problems. So I'd be in support, Mayor Walker, to what you're suggesting.
All right. Motion to move forward with some
I'll
path.
make that motion.
All right, second? I'll second. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Next item is there a path forward for some state uniformity on infrastructure standards?
Yep.
Go ahead.
There. Perfect. Nick, will you scan down to that little section B? Now, you'll note we had 3 deliberation questions here. The third one we wrote time permitting. We were prophetic. We won't have time for that one, so we'll come back to that one. So we started, Mayor Walker, 10 minutes late, so we will be done by 2:10. But we need to make sure we get some good feedback here. So Justin, take it away.
All right, thanks, Cam. Mayor Walker, earlier when you made a dam motion, I assumed that dealt with water infrastructure. But what so the next question here, and I liked what Councilmember Egbert talked about is, are we open to discussions on this, or are we open to getting a solution on this? And that's really some of what we're asking today. So a little background on the infrastructure. I'm sure everybody remembers a couple of years ago we had a lot of conversations around road width. I'm looking for a standard on road width across the state, and we had a lot of negotiations on that. And as we've talked to developers, legislators, others, there is a continual appetite to look to see if there are other areas where there could be some standardization. Now, we've pushed back on a lot of standardization. We've also had another effort a couple of years ago around pipe standards and trying to find some standardization with pipes, whether that's secondary, whether that's culinary, stormwater, everything. And from the builder's perspective, looking for some standardization, it's cleaner, it's easier, they know what they're doing from one city to the next. Get that from an efficiency perspective. Also understand that there are different, all kinds of different requirements for geological reasons, for soil issues, for slope issues, for a lot of different things. And so the question is, and we don't have a specific infrastructure sector item that we're talking about right now. We're actually having a meeting directly after this one to talk about what some of that could be with the land use task force. So the question is there room to talk about infrastructure standards depending on a whole lot of various factors, depending on what those look like, depending on different areas? Is this something that we're willing to engage in discussions on? Is there room to move on infrastructure standards with a whole lot of caveats on, depending on what those look like? So would love your feedback on that, thoughts on that one. This is one that this has been a perennial issue that's come up from developers. It's something we've pushed back on a lot. It's coming back again this year. And it's not just something that's being talked about. I guess the last piece, it's not just being talked about there, but in the state housing plan, there's a group talking around this. This is one that comes up all the time. So question, is there room to talk here on any kind of infrastructure standards? So for example, we set a road width standard last time that said a road is 32 feet, and that's going to be the standard with exception. Are there other things? They talk about things all the time, setbacks, pipe sizing, all kinds of different things that could come up with infrastructure standards.
I guess I'd be curious.
Sidewalks, yeah.
Which infrastructure things do they want to discuss? Because, a developer has a very narrow lens about their project.
Yep.
And cities have to have a much broader lens about the whole system and its interconnectedness and the things it connects to, like a sewer treatment plant.
Sure.
And so there could be some things that may make sense, but I'm a little skeptical that they want to talk about the things that make them the most profit. and push the most expense back onto the city collectively and isn't thoughtful about the entire system. So there potentially is a narrow list, but I don't know what that narrow list is.
No, and this is a very preliminary discussion. Like I said, we're going to meet with them right after and talk and find out what their list is. So it'd be awesome if this was like flipped by an hour and a half. But yeah, Councilmember Dugan, right before you, I'll say one quick thing on this. Kate, you mentioned the whole system thing. That was the pipe sizing debate we had a couple of years ago. A 4-inch pipe might work fine in your subdivision, but doesn't work well when the next subdivision gets tacked on afterwards. And all of the engineers, as we talked about it, came around to that from both sides. Everyone said, yeah, that doesn't really make sense. But yeah, they're looking for what can we do that doesn't necessarily have to fit the whole system versus what we need to fit the system.
Thank you. This just begs the question, why? And I want a clear understanding of why you would want to go through this process and spend the energy to have the discussion on it without a real clear reason, and how is it going to move this needle of, if we're looking at infrastructure for housing, how is this moving the needle on the housing side of the house? And I'm going to go off on a tangent right now. The ADU discussion we're just having here, we're spending millions of dollars on ADU discussions, and it is not going to move the needle on housing, but we have to have that discussion because others want to have it. In this case, why do we have this? Why is this conversation necessary, and how is it going to move the needle on what we're trying to do with effective efficiencies or in housing in that area? That would be my question to them, because I don't want to spend a lot of time discussing something that's wasting our time.
Sure, and that's a fair question. I think, and again, this is me, I think, giving some of the answer they would give, not me speaking as me, but some of the answer they'd say is, if they know what the standard is, easier to plan, it's more efficient, faster things get built, the cheaper it might be. Big might, that was me adding that part in. But that's where some of that comes from. And I think the only point I would add is if there's someone with a massive outlier, I'm going to pick on pipes again just for a second. If 8 inches is the standard, but some city for some reason is like, we do 12-inch pipes. The question may be like, why do they really need 12-inch pipes? Does that make any sense? So the question may be better framed if someone is a massive outlier. Again, roads, if someone says, 32 roads are a norm, but we want 100-foot roads, should we deal with the outliers? I guess that's part of the question there.
A question, or a thought rather, I've had some conversations with some groups about issues in my community where they want to have us change our standards, for example, on one of our utilities, a utility that not everybody has. And generally when they talk to me about my power utility, they're telling me that they want my standards to be whatever the least standard they can find would be.
Sure.
And that's not something that as a community we've wanted to entertain at all, because through our growth and evolution as a town, we used to have a lot of, in this case, we used to have a lot of power outages for this reason and that reason. And as we, as a community, struggled through power outages every other week because things were dug into or whatever, we came up with a different standard that has resolved it. And now we don't have power outages, but 2 or 3 a year. And so I think the conversation on the very high level is good to say, well, what do you want to talk about? Mm-hmm. But knowing, or at least believing, that the discussion will lead very quickly to whatever the lowest common denominator could be, I think is something that we need to be very, very hesitant to engage there, because that's where they'll want to go.
So along those same lines, with an example, a sewer example, that any of these conversations about infrastructure, coming up with a standard, the lowest common denominator is not going to work. Mayor Palmer and I don't live that far away from each other, and we have a main street that bisects our 2 cities that we're both almost equal distance from, not too far, on opposite sides of that street. And neither one of us can get in and out of our neighborhoods right now because it is costing taxpayers a lot of money to make the sewer pipes a lot bigger, and it's been a mess, and it will continue to be a mess, and it's going to take forever because The estimated time that they would last is not even close because of the increase, because they're adding ADUs, because we're adding all the people, because we're adding all the development. And what was supposed to be enough is not nearly enough. In the end, it's costing taxpayers. It's a nightmare actually for commuters. And it's just this ongoing years-long project. So I think we both have strong feelings about making sure any infrastructure standards do not go to whatever the least that we can get away with. Well, this is sufficient. Sufficient in fast-growing areas is not even real. It's never been enough.
My view is there's already standards. International building codes, transportation has all kinds of standards, and we in the towns have to decide what's best for our town. And yes, I think we're obligated. Fortunately, in my town, it's a long ways to the next town, so I don't have those kinds of issues. But up on the Wasatch Front, obviously you do, and it's, you know, like the League's job and or, you know, working together to get those problems solved. But there's standards out there. Unfortunately, it's a lot like computer standards. There's so many of them, you get to choose which one, and sometimes it doesn't line up. You got to work through it.
So knowing certain stuff flows downhill and paydays on Friday, do we want to go forward with the standard, or is that even something you want to try and come up with? Doesn't sound like it.
I think the developers got a pretty big win with the street standard by going to 32 feet. You know, there was a lot of the work in that. I think that was rational. In regards to utilities, like Seth said, you know, some of us have different utilities. Some have more utilities in our street than others, right? There is an issue, I think, that could be discussed, but I don't even know that it's their job. And there's some state water quality standards in regards to things like, you know, water lines being 10 feet away from sewer lines or other PI lines. That's really kind of based on an old standard, and pipe connections have changed a lot since then. I've had people admit to me from that office, that's an old standard. It's just everybody's kind of comfortable with it because it's been around for so long. But if it's not needed anymore, that's one that ought to be addressed. But that's not our job. That's the state, you know, water quality people's job.
Because some of the utilities are going to tie back to sewer treatment facilities, or for those of us that are municipal power cities, I'm less comfortable there. If you want to talk about sidewalks, maybe.
So I'm hearing it kind of depends on, so I guess, Mayor, Mr. Chair, or yes, I guess the question, so is it worth, let's find out what they have to say, but tread very cautiously.
Yeah, I don't think we offer, I think we listen.
Okay. Yeah.
So how do we feel about a motion for, we'll listen?
Motion to actively listen.
Active listening. All right. Is there a
Justin
second?
has to actively listen.
Second.
And do it better.
Motion is to actively listen. Is that your second?
I think that means they're going to be walking on a sidewalk while they talk. Yeah, it's called a walkie-talkie.
So, yeah, it is a walk and talk. Mayor, the last bit I just want to emphasize, Mayor Johnson used the word rational, Justin used the word justifiable, and the 32-foot road width, again, going back to the battle scars a lot of us have from that battle, we did a lot of research and found that most of our cities were in that 32-foot range anyway, but we found we had some cities that were requiring 40-foot wide roads. And as we talked about it collectively, that rational, justifiable question kept coming up. And are we going to defend that, or is there a rational, reasonable place to end? Now, the question that several of you have hinted at, I asked point blank, and Councilmember Shelton was on the call when I asked it. I asked the builders on the call, show me the evidence of where the 32-foot wide road standard has improved affordability, improved ownership, and achieved these outcomes. And that was listed in the governor's office minutes of the meeting of like, let's see if this has helped. And I think that's also part of the question to be asking here too. Is like, okay, if we get the yes here, show us how this benefits that future home buyer. But there may be examples as we listen of things where we can say, you know, let's help that community because that community is requiring something that's unjustifiable, and let's see if we can address that in a way that works without negatively impacting others. But yeah, very much hear you on the active listening piece. But this has been prioritized by the governor's office, been prioritized by a lot of the other stakeholders, and we have our first active listening session here in 10 minutes.
All right, all in favor of active listening, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. We're going to be actively listening on this issue. And do you want to go, do we have enough time? Do you want to?
Yep, I'm going to wrap us up here with a couple quick things. Thank you for staying a couple minutes longer. We're not going to hit deliberation question number 3. Our homework of you is to look at the information in the packet about homework question number 3, because we've been hearing all interim that the state housing plan will replace moderate income housing plans. And we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. And we think the model that we supported, House Bill 37, makes a lot of sense. That model included prioritizing certain tactics that show that they can move the needle around ownership and affordability. So giving more credit to certain tactics, and then also spelling out what compliance exactly means, so it's easier to comply with and take some of the ambiguity out of the statute. So we're going to keep working in that space, but please look at that. The other homework is we will be asking you for some data. And Carson, I'm going to turn it to you in just one moment on the data piece, but let me just give one quick example of how the data can matter. So this is a headline from this morning. I'm not going to reference the city, but it was Blank City is slated to shrink the minimum dwelling size for its homes. They currently are still requiring homes up to 1,875 square feet. We changed that in statute over 4 years ago, that cities cannot require houses above 1,000 square feet. So headline from this morning of a large city that is now changing their zoning to comply with state law. And as the mayors who were at the governor's mansion know, like one of the big items of discussion at the mansion was we need smaller units on smaller lots, and city zoning requires the larger units. And that's just not true based on state law. This one city hasn't updated. They are now going to update, which is great, right? But we don't want that one anecdote to drive the discussion. On the research side, my second page here, you can't see these pretty visuals, but this is from Saratoga Springs. I will name them because they provided us with a bunch of data about small lots in their city where they've had large units built on those small lots. So they have 2,252 single-family homes on lots smaller than 6,000 square feet, and then list the home sizes, some of which are more than 3,000 square feet, and asking where's the link to affordability with the large houses on the small lots. This sort of data is absolutely critical as part of Faces and Places and helping legislators understand what's happening on the ground. Carson, can you take a moment and just give a quick overview of your data plan for the next few weeks, and then Mayor Walker, I'll wrap us.
Yeah, thank you, Cam, and sorry I'm not able to be there in person with you. I was in another webinar this morning. Like Cam mentioned, we're actively collecting data on a whole bunch of different housing and land use related topics. One of the fun things about this is we never know exactly what issues are going to be prioritized at the Capitol and where the big fights are going to be. So we kind of have this game of trying to collect data on everything and anything that could be in that discussion. So right now, we're trying to put together the summer land use housing survey. This is a survey we do every year. Sometimes it's a little bit later. Right now, it looks like we have a sense of what some of the major issues are going to be. So Cam mentioned the large homes on small lots. We're also going to be trying to collect some information on infrastructure standards like you all just finished discussing. This could apply to a wide variety of infrastructure components. But we're trying to figure out if there's areas where there's more or less variation to understand what to provide kind of a strong defense for why local governments might have variation in infrastructure standards. and then B, understand if there's areas where there might be more or less commonality to help inform the active listening. So we'll, in addition to that, we'll be reaching out to cities to try to collect more information around infrastructure for entitled units. We've provided this point a couple different times, and it's been really critical for our proactive defense on land use and housing. But we'd like to be able to take this to the next level and help try to understand where specifically those shortcomings are. Obviously, we've pushed many times on trying to encourage the development community to build where they've already got the entitlements rather than pursue additional density or state preemption. However, if we can help with state funding bridge some of these infrastructure gaps that we currently have, that might be able to ease some of those constraints and get housing built where it's already planned. So there'll be a couple other pieces there. We're still trying to figure out how broad we want the survey to be, but we're shooting for the week after next for the survey rollout. So we'll be reaching out to your city managers and community development directors directly. We'll kind of do it in phases. So after we've got the initial round of feedback, we'll, if we're still missing some cities, we'll start doing broader outreach through Friday Facts, through board emails. We want to make sure that you all have the opportunity to weigh in on this survey. So just please keep an eye out for that. If you have other data that you'd like to provide, or if there's other questions specifically that you think we should be asking local governments or data points we should be collecting, please feel free to reach out to me, especially in the next week or so, as we're starting to put together the outline for that data request.
Perfect. Thank you, Carson. You as board members will be absolutely vital to make sure that your fellow mayors know this survey is out there, that we're collecting this data. And Carson referenced the infrastructure shortcomings for entitled units. This is an example of what we want to try to build out. This is just Harrisville City, population currently about 7,000. This is over 1,000 entitled units in Harrisville alone, where they broke down for us what the deficient utilities are for every entitled subdivision in the city. And then on the back, exactly lot by lot where those shortcomings are. So we've been sharing this information with state leaders to say you could preempt Harrisville zoning tomorrow, and it still doesn't get this infrastructure built. And Harrisville's got over 1,000 housing units, and that's for a city of 7,000 people in Weber County. And so if you were frustrated by how the event went at the governor's mansion, we have to provide this data. And I want to publicly thank Mayor Mike Mendenhall of Spanish Fork, Mayor Shepherd of Clearfield, and Mayor Palmer of Harriman for their participation in the panel that they did at the governor's mansion. But I think all of you got a taste of the power of anecdotes, and we need to counter anecdotes with data and sometimes counter anecdotes with anecdotes. I'll note that Carson's also done a lot of work on ADUs research, and this research is critical. And summertime's tricky to follow up with folks, particularly during festival season and everything else. But as this goes out, please be in touch with your members or with mayors and council members in your areas to make sure that they are doing faces and places, inviting legislators, having those conversations, bring them to City Hall, bring them to rodeos, bring them to your communities, and then share the data with us so that we can complete the narrative at the Capitol. Okay, Mayor Walker asked for 10 more minutes. I'm past the 10 minutes. The last thing on those, we're going to skip question 3. And on the policy priorities piece, we'll skip 1 and 3. On transportation utility fee, the league officers, Justin and I have a meeting with representatives from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at the end of August, which will be after our next board meeting. Our plan is to reconvene our transportation utility fee work group from 2 summers ago to talk through some potential alternatives to the bills that have gone forward and not passed over the last couple of years. So if you want to be part of that transportation utility fee work group, let us know. We'll be picking up the list where we left it off 2 years ago. If you're on that list, just know you'll get an invite in the next 2 days. If you weren't and want to be involved, let us know. Likewise, Mayor Walker and I were talking, and his recommendation, I concur, is no board meeting in July, so we won't schedule one in July. On August 18th, we'll next meet as a board. We'd originally scheduled it at 9:30 because we were going to do LPC right after, but we've moved LPC a week due to other scheduling. So we would need a motion to change this because it's part of the public calendar, but our suggestion to the board would be to change the August meeting from 9:30 to noon. And then like today, we could provide lunch to board members, and instead of meeting at 9:30, we'd meet at noon. So we need a motion for that if we want to proceed that way. And then our housing work group has 4 meetings between now and then, and we invite all of you to participate therein and to volunteer other people from your city. We've had really good participation thus far. The next meeting is later this week, and we'll be doing deep dives on these topics and more. So with that, Mayor, thank you everybody for being here, and we hope you have a happy 4th, and we need a motion, not to adjourn yet, but a motion to change the time if the board sees fit on August 18th.
Is there a motion for that? Second? All right. All in favor of changing the August 18th, 2025 meeting to noon at League office for lunch, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, got that. That takes us now to the final motion.
Thank you for hosting us.
Is there a motion? Second? All in favor of adjourning, say aye. Doesn't matter if you're opposed. All right. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.